We'd like to start this first plenary session of the 20th National Convention of Veterans for Peace here in Dallas, Texas. I'd like to welcome everyone here. My name is David Cline. I'm the current president of the Board of Directors of Veterans for Peace. And I'm glad to be back here in Texas after 35 years trying to raise some hell again. This has been a lot of work, this convention, and there still is a lot of work, but I want to single out two people who've done more than their share. Dick Underhill, who's our program coordinator. And Bernie Jezizek, who's our logistics coordinator. I don't think Bernie's here because he's still working out there. The theme of this year's convention is 20 years of waging peace. And in 2005, we can say that 20 years of waging peace, we need Veterans for Peace now more than ever. For the last 2 years, we found ourselves in an illegal and unnecessary and an unjust war in Iraq. We've stood up in the forefront of the movement to bring the troops home now and to treat them right when they come back. We've reached out to military families and the younger veterans coming back from the war, and the Iraq Veterans Against the War was formed. And we're going to continue to do that until we see all our men and women safe and sound here at home and our country fulfill its responsibility to aid in the rebuilding of Iraq. If you break it, you don't own it, but you got to fix it. And while we're talking about a 2-year anniversary, in 2005, we have several other significant anniversaries. It's the 40 years of the end of 60 years of the end of World War II, and 60 years of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, beginning the most savage era, the nuclear era, threatening the existence of humanity. It's also the 60th year of the division of Korea, a division that continues with American soldiers lined up on the southern half and North Koreans on the other side, and the people of Korea living in a divided nation. It's also the 30th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War, the longest war this nation has ever fought. So when we talk about anniversaries, it's not to commemorate wars, but to remember from the past, to remember what we experienced, and to teach this nation and our people what we have to do to bring a change for peace and for justice.
Military policewoman in Iraq, Kelly.
Well, I've been sitting here listening to people talk about the wars that they were in and what happened when those wars were over and how they changed and what they did. And unfortunately for us, our war is still going on, and it seems like there's not an end in sight, and we don't know what or how this war is going to end, or when this war is going to end, and what that's going to look like. So I'm pleased to talk about the group Iraq Veterans Against the War that we formed at the last Veterans for Peace convention in Boston last July, and glad to know that now we're at our second convention, and our group has been gaining momentum. We've been very busy, some of us insanely busy, over this past year with doing public speaking outreach at high schools, working with politicians to try to get them to sign occupation withdrawal resolutions. But it's also, of course, bittersweet because the reason why we keep getting more members and being able to continue to talk about our experiences and the situation in Iraq is because it continues. And today the number of US dead is 1,826. And of course there's no accurate count for the tens of thousands of Iraqis who've lost their life because of this war. But it's only through the continued efforts of us and of people like all of you in this room that the public is going to become aware, going to demand that we end this occupation. And for Iraq Veterans Against the War, our mission is first to demand an end to the occupation of Iraq, to bring our soldiers home now and to take care of them adequately when they get home, and to help the Iraqi people rebuild their country, not with soldiers and guns and foreign corporations, but with the assistance that they ask for as a completely competent people. And so that's what we've been trying to do this past year. I would also like to say that Iraq Veterans Against the War probably would not have been founded without the help of veterans from previous wars, from many members here in Veterans for Peace. And it's so important to our group and important for returning Iraq vets to be able to have that support of veterans from previous.
Get out of the military through a process of going AWOL or staying AWOL and being in deserter status. They trick people with the word deserter. Deserter status is being gone more than 30 days and being dropped from the rolls of your company. They deliberately confuse that with a crime of desertion, which can carry 5 years in jail, which means you've left and you're intending never to come back, which is a hard thing to prove. So when somebody's AWOL for 2 weeks, they're contacted and it says, you better get back before 30 days or you'll be a deserter. So there's a lot of sort of trickery in that, and they're not going to tell people that in some cases there's some fairly streamlined ways of getting out. For example, people who are in the Army and still in training, National Guard Reserve people who don't report, for activation, also National Guard and Reserve people who don't show up for initial active duty training, like they've gone to a few meetings but they haven't yet gone to basic. That's an even easier way to get out with an entry-level separation. So there are a lot of things like that. We deal with medical discharges, hardship. We try to do whatever we can. We try to follow up as much as we can. We do conscientious objector applications, and of course that's a big thing, because that's sort of at the heart of kind of peace stuff, where people are in the military and they may not have ever heard of conscientious objection, but they may not know how to spell it. They may think it only applies to people of some religious groups, or maybe only people who have been to college and kind of can write the kind of essays that college people can write. And that's not the case at all. So a lot of what we try to do around conscientious objection is being inclusive like that, to let people know that can apply to them. And basically there are 3 criteria: that there's a sincere, either religious or moral ethical basis for their opposition to war, that they're opposed to all war, and that can get a little tricky, but that is what they require, and that their opposition to war has crystallized since being in the military. And it's by talking to people, it's usually easy for people to see that that's generally the case. They're not seeing what the recruiter slickly said was travel and money for school and job training, all that stuff. They're seeing war. Or if they're still in training, they're seeing the psychological preparation for war that's this dehumanization and stuff, and being mistreated in order that they're and abused in order that they're going to abuse other people, because that's how it works. So Anita Cole is a GI rights counselor, and she got out of the military in the Army in 2002 as a conscientious objector with an honorable discharge, and went on to do GI rights counseling. So she going to talk about that a little bit. Sure. Do you want me to give her the mic? You're going to get the other 25% here.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, I do want to visit really quickly the point about DEP, because that is such an important piece, and a huge number of the calls that we get are in fact from people like you mentioned in the DEP. And the way that I've come up to explain it, because the hardest part about counseling DEP people, I know this is a little bit off, it won't take long, is delayed enlistment program. It's where they initially sign up, but they haven't gone off to basic training yet. I'm sorry. My name is Anita Cole, and I was in active duty Army from 1998 to 2002. I was a Chinese interrogator. I was honorably discharged in 2002 as a conscientious objector. And then Yes, I use the hotline. In fact, what Steve said about people calling, the other part of the military, you know, for all of you who are vets, you know that so much of it is suck it up and drive on. And so when people are calling the hotline, by that point they've gotten to a point that they just want to talk to somebody who's not going to tell them suck it up and drive on. And so as counselors, when you're listening to them, if you know, you're not going to, of course we don't say that at all or anything like it. And then people just start overflowing with, of course, you know, if you've been in the military, the military has like fucked you over in like one way or another multiple times. So they start just this outpouring. And so sometimes you just have to get the whole story and ask a lot of follow-up questions and see what's really going on. One soldier recently called me, and he was AWOL because he'd gotten back from 13 months in Iraq. And he started drinking. He never drank before. He had a DUI, and he was having some big issues. Then he went AWOL because he told his command he thought he needed some counseling, because he was like, I wasn't ever sober, and that's not who I am. And so he told his command that. They didn't do anything, so he went AWOL because he just couldn't get his head wrapped around where he was. But talking to him, asking some follow-up questions, I said, have you talked to anybody about PTSD? There are some other situations there that need to be addressed, not only being AWOL. And so, you have to be able to really draw this information out of people, because they, in their mind, think that the problem is one thing. He thought it was AWOL. Whereas actually the problem is a few other things. It's PTSD, which he was self-medicating with alcohol, which got him into a DUI, created some legal problems. His whole life was blowing up, and he went AWOL because he didn't know what else he had to do. So these are the types of calls that come in. As a conscientious objector, and that's another piece. People just don't know about the conscientious objection. Or they think that conscientious objection is pacifism. That one of the distinctions I think that I want to make to what Steve said is that the regulation, and this is an important piece, doesn't say that you're opposed to all war. It says you're opposed to your participation in war in any form. So for example, I didn't need to say, and you should avoid, and you should counsel conscientious objectors from getting into these hypothetical conversations about, well, what would you have done with Hitler? If I knew what I would have done with Hitler, I wouldn't be in the military. I'd be running for public office, or I would be solving the world's problems. Certainly these are big questions, and I don't know the answers to them. I don't have to know the answers to them. All I know is I am opposed to my participation in war in any form. My moral, ethical, religious value system has changed since I entered the military, and there's no way that I will do this, that I will be part of the atrocities that we render on other societies. The DEP, this is the analogy that I wanted to bring back, because the hardest part about counseling for DEP people is getting them to believe you, because the recruiters have filled their minds that they're going to go off to jail and everything else. So just getting them to believe you. As counselors, that's the hardest thing. And one of the ways that I've tried to explain it to people, and I've had some success, and that's why I want to share it as a kind of a best practice, is telling people that the DEP is like an engagement. It's like if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you say, "Will you marry me?" And then he or she says, "Yes, honey." Well, that's what you've done with the military. Is you've gone and you've had that romantic dinner, and you said that you're gonna marry him or her. If things change, you don't have to write him or her a letter. You don't have to get permission. You don't have to do any of that. However, when you take that next step and you go to the church or wherever and you get married, that's a legally binding agreement. So for the military, that's when you go off to basic training. At that point, you're no longer engaged. You can't just break the engagement. You're married. It's legal, and divorce is messy. So that's the analogy. I've had some success in explaining, and getting it through to DEPers that you know, if it's in high school, if they're in high school and their minds change, they get that financial aid packet, which enables their family to meet the other portion and send them to college. They don't want to go into the military. Don't go. It's nice if you write a letter. You know, some people have stronger views on that. It'll just let your recruiter know where to harass you and that sort of stuff. But some questions?
$2,000. Well, but you know, how would they enforce payback in that situation if they decided to break the engagement?
Right, what they do, and this is a big question. My command was just basically salivating when I went conscientious objector status, because I went into the military with my bachelor's, and I went and enlisted, and my command was just so excited that I was, you know, to tell me that I was going to have to pay back my college money. And I said, well, I came in and you didn't give me any college money. I've been paying this all along. So, yeah. So I was paying for it the whole time on my own. That wasn't one of my perks. But because that happens for so many, in my case where I work with conscientious objectors, that's true. Especially with officers, the military's banked their whole college education. What happens after that is it becomes very akin to a regular student loan, and the terms of a regular student loan are that it can, your monthly payments cannot exceed a fixed percentage of your income. And so you may feel like, and certainly anyone with massive student loans, you know, feels like they're never going to get out from under that debt, but you do. And the military, it basically converts, so that $32,000 would then be somewhat, it's not exactly like a federal loan, but it has comparable interest rates and so forth. And you have to pay that back. The military, however, won't tell you this. The military will tell you, do you have $32,000 in your bank account? And of course, what young person has $32,000 in their bank account that went into the military? So, you know, it's just misinformation.
Anita, your experience with doing the CO, how long of a time period was it from the point where you realized that's what you needed to do until you were discharged? I mean, are we talking a year process, several weeks, a month?
Yeah.
And what did you have to go through to?
Okay.
I don't mean a commanding officer.
No. Conscientious objector first.
A commanding officer of yourself.
Right. Yeah.
What did you have to go through? Just briefly.
Sure. Just briefly.
Well,
Woo. How do you describe hell briefly? Yeah, that's always the issue I don't like talking about. That's tough. Yeah, no, it wasn't do it yourself. If it wasn't for the GI rights hotline, I would be in jail somewhere, because it gets really dicey, and it feels like your whole, you know, life is riding on the line. So there's a lot. My process, to answer the first part of your question, I put my paperwork in on May 15th, which I in retrospect later found was International Conscientious Objector Day. So I felt like that when I was grasping at straws for good omens and something to be a good sign, I took that as one. But I wasn't recognized until November 22nd of 2001, and then my final out was January 23rd of 2002. So that was the time frame. What I had to prove, it was in everybody's cases is a little bit different. And for me, I was, I guess, lucky. My entire, I went from being model soldier and like golden soldier in my unit that the command and everybody loved, to one day at a rifle range having a really, really bad day. You know, it was a couple of things. It was one, I didn't have, you know, the NCOIC didn't check me for hearing protection. I'm about 70% deaf in my left ear, so I'm pretty protective of my hearing anyway. So I wasn't checked for hearing protection on an indoor range. You know, the sound of 15 M16s going off, as well as the reverberation, you know, when you're arms distance apart, just was, you know, very, very disorienting. So I ended up in a fetal position at the base of my weapon, just covering my head. They called ceasefire, gave me earplugs. You know, with the military, they don't really come down on you, especially they didn't come down on me because, you know, some things had happened prior to that, which made me untouchable. My whole command just, they were really way too lenient with me in many regards. But then right after that, immediately after I had hearing protection, I'm trying to focus. My buddy's expended brass burnt my cheek, which isn't awful. You're not going to die. It just feels like a curling iron burn or something like this, which I don't know how many of you know about. But nonetheless, you know, it's so I'm trying to look at the target downrange through my eyes watering at this point. And one of my coworkers one of the NCOIC walks by, one of my supervisors, and just says, "Come on, Cole, you're a killer." And I just thought, oh my God, I would never use that word to define myself. So I said, but I was laying there, you know, prone position with my M16 going, well, one of us is wrong. Is he wrong or am I wrong? And then I thought, well, I think I'm wrong because I'm laying here trying, and I'm frustrated with myself because I'm not able to get a tight shot group, you know, in center mass on this silhouette. So I think I'm wrong. And then that really bothered me. I didn't want to go through CO status. I said, Anita, you got yourself into this. You put your name on the dotted line. You're gonna keep doing it. You're not gonna get out before your contract is up, so forth, so on, da 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 da. So I'm not a person prone to depression. I immediately, however, I didn't recognize it as depression. I slipped into a mass depression. I just didn't go out. I didn't see anybody. I would, you know, sleep early. You know, I usually survive on like 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I would sleep, you know, all the time. I didn't want to see anyone. I was always really picky about like my hair and my uniform. I didn't care about any of that. So it was just classic signs of depression. Which topped off when my family came to visit, and I was in Japan. They said, "Oh, we want to go to Hiroshima," so we went to Hiroshima. Oh, that's not a good place for you know, a budding CO to go. So at that point, I thought I am part of the most destructive organization in the world. And what's that? You noticed. Yeah, and I said, I can't. I said. And I also realized when my family came to visit, that was the other piece, is when I heard my own laugh, it startled me, and I was afraid, and it sounded foreign. And so it was a part of that visit, and when we went to Hiroshima, I said, who are you becoming? You don't know yourself, you don't respect yourself. Every day when I would put the uniform on, I would get nauseous. Because I felt that I was wearing the uniform of people who brutalized, you know, people all over the world. You know, helped in some circumstances, but that's not what we're trained for. And they say that well, what about peacekeeping? I said, you know, I haven't, in basic, they didn't do a single workshop for me on peacekeeping. I can kill people with an M16 and M60, you know, a claymore and a you know, a whole laundry list of weapons. I'm not here to peacekeep. I'm here as a soldier. And that's not what soldiers do. So, I mean, it was really obvious in my case from my command to see that there was a marked, there was a line in the sand. And that's pretty much, and for most people, it's not clean cut. They're like, well, it's kind of been going on for a while. You just have to keep asking them the questions so that they can, you know, and maybe it's me just being a little bit cynical, but I say, you know, this is the military who wants to decide whether or not your moral, ethical value system, religious value system makes you a conscientious objector. I said, it's not about that. They can't validate you. You are valid. I said, so you need to present the package in a way that makes it clear-cut legally. It's not about, you know, anything else. It's a matter of of seeing the boxes that need to be checked and checking them. So you ask them questions, you tell them to, you know, don't include extraneous pieces of information which may be part of the whole picture because it will dilute them from their message. Keep them on message, make it very clear cut. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming back to us and recognizing that.
Well,
I'm glad that you were able at that point to recognize that you were making that shift. And I'm not sure everybody is able to do that.
I think a lot of COs do, and it's because the whole experience is so difficult. And I mean, it's hell. What's that?
Did you have
Not really. They support me. They supported me like any, parents who. But actually, like my dad himself was worried. He was like, this is going to be a black mark on your whole future, because of the whole society. He was like, what are you doing? It's just another year. And I was like, Dad, I'm not going to make it another year. We at that point, September 11th had happened. Then in the middle of my process, I had applied before, and then September 11th happened. Then we went into Afghanistan. When we went to Afghanistan, I was very active in another organization in Tokyo, and I had great press contacts. I had developed a whole plan for self-immolation in my uniform, and told my chaplain's assistant just about it, so that she could let the press on base to witness it as a statement that not everybody in uniform is behind what we're doing. She told me at that point, she said, Anita, you can do that, and you'll be in the news for 15 minutes at most. Or you can get out as a conscientious objector and spend the rest of your life making it easier for everybody else. So that was my chaplain's assistant. We're still in contact, and now she's a career counselor keeping people in his re-enlistment. So we have very interesting discussions. But yeah, so
what was your MOS?
I was a Chinese interrogator.
Okay, and this was not with an outfit that was likely to see combat then? You were more of a...
Actually, no, pretty much all interrogators will, if there's combat going on, will see combat. Every single person that's of my colleagues who's still in the military has been to Iraq or Afghanistan.
When you have an epiphany like this, in the process, and you're not in a combat situation, does the Army treat those types of situations differently?
I don't think so.
For instance, you just say under the stress of combat, people would be more likely to say, I feel like I'm a conscientious objector now, rather than when you're, in some career echelon job. And I was just wondering whether or not the Army distinguished, or the military distinguishes between those feelings.
No, and that's something that has come up again and again and again. And another manifestation of that is people say, well, you're an Iraq Veterans Against the War, you were never in Iraq. Well, anybody who's been in the military it's not a question of like one person being more soldierly than another. We're all in the same military. We have the singular mission. We don't get to pick where our orders send us. We go where we're told to go. So whether I was in Tokyo or whether somebody else is in Iraq, that doesn't make me less soldierly than that person. That just, I happen to have better luck or whatever than he or she did, but we're still in the same military and we're still supporting that same mission. So whether you're in a rear echelon or whether you're forward deployed, you're still there so that our country can,
They would fight you on that issue. Mm-hmm. I know that has happened before.
Yeah, commanding officers, in my experience, commanding officers, often have a little bit of a hands-off. They let their first sergeants and other NCOs do the dirty work of intimidating and pushing the whole cowardice button. And yeah, that was really sensitive. I wasn't able to talk about my experiences in getting out for a good year until after I got out, just because that was I had very mixed feelings. I knew that what I did was right, but yet at the same time I had a sense of personal shame that because I'd left my unit. So yeah, that's a very tough button. And then I met another CO in New York, and when I met him, I was just like, he was the first CO I'd met face to face, and it was just a military CO, and it was just amazing because I said, wow, he's a good person. I really had a lot of respect for him. And I thought, wow, I might be a good person too. And so that's kind of, even though I knew, intellectually and morally, ethically that what I was doing was right, there's still that underlying sense of, well, are you a coward? And I don't think I'm a coward. I went through hell. I was confined. I was threatened with a federal conviction. I know the pressure and the unmitigated shit that I had to put up with. So I know that I'm not a coward.
Well, I know that there are certain instances where you feel if you are going to go against the grain, that it takes more courage.
No, it takes support, and that's what the GI Rights Hotline's for. It takes courage, and it takes a community of people who are saying, we're there with you. We know that it's a big step, and we're going to be there with you every moment of the way. You have any problem, if people are giving you a hard time, you just give us a call. We're always going to listen, and that's what I had in the GI Rights Hotline. And so When I was faced with confinement, when I was faced with a court-martial or choosing court-martial or Article 15, they said to me, it was just unbiased advice. You can, because I was threatened for, what was it, insubordinate conduct toward a chief warrant officer. So, they were going to push for a court-martial. So I called the GRA's hotline, and I said my whole record. I went to JAG. JAG says that that they're not going to have any success getting a conviction on me because my record is perfect. I've got all these awards. I've been a great soldier, leader here, leader there. And then the JAG says your command's not going to get a conviction. This is obviously retribution. And but the GRA's hotline said that might be true, but you should also know that court-martials generally have a 97% rate of federal conviction. So I said, am I going to gamble? I'm not a gambler. So I said, well, no matter how self-righteous I might feel, I'm not going to go, with the 3% odds. So I took the Article 15 and the confinement. And when I got my paperwork while I was in confinement, my first sergeant comes to my barracks door with my supervisor, throws this paper at me and says, "Get her out of here," which I knew was his words for, "She's been approved." So I asked for a copy of the paperwork, and when I get the letter back from when I get the letter that has been faxed from Department of Army Conscientious Objector Review Board, it has on the fax line at the top a date, and it was the same date that I was read for my Article 15. So if I had pushed for a court-martial, that would have stopped in its tracks my discharge, and I would have had to play my luck with whether or not I get a conviction, and by my honorable discharge at that point. So it's tricky. They're tricky little buggers. So you've got to have good people advising you.
I just want to say a couple things about her situation. One is that even if you don't feel shame, a lot of times it's hard to talk. I mean, I was part of GI resistance during the Vietnam War, and I don't feel ashamed of that at all. But I'll tell you, even in the San Francisco Bay Area, it was hard to talk to my coworkers about that a lot of times. So there's a way, you can get hidden even if there isn't that shame, and if the shame is there, it's going to add to that too. So there's a lot of that. And another thing I want to say is, I think Anita really showed kind of the evolution of her thought, and we all familiar with this kind of thing. But that it does take time. I mean, Jeff Patterson's talked about his story of becoming a CO, and that's the evolution of his change of his thinking. And so, as the GI Rights Hotline, I think I mentioned earlier, when we were swamped with calls, we were not in a position to follow up with people to the extent that was needed to support them. Because, and that's something that expanding this and having more people do it will allow this to happen more. Because also the people that get supported and will be like Anita, be like Jeff, that they become activists. And same with lots of you here, and if you choose to come, you're not summer soldiers anyway. You're not going to start and just probably quit. So, I mean, people doing it for the long term is really what's people who are trained and then work together with other people, get a good base of knowledge, are able to talk to people well, and keep at it. That's what's really important on the hotline. Those experienced counselors.
How's you, Bill? Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Passalaqua. I wasn't even here for it. Which means I'm not embarrassed, I guess. I came up from Austin today, which means I drove right past Crawford, Texas. So I saw a sign for it, and I thought, well, reminds me of an old song I wrote. I wrote this last year during the 9/11 Commission. And I was watching the political goings-on with rapt attention, and I was wondering, who are they going to throw to the dogs? Who's going to be the scapegoat here? They're not going to testify, right? They're not going to go out there and testify. Hanging with Big Dick Cheney down at the Crawford Ranch. taking executive privilege against the legislative branch. Condoleezza, make it right, dear, my ratings are sinking down. You must go out on the Sunday talk shows before they run me out of town. If you remember correctly, they were not going to let anybody in the administration testify. Before the commission that was examining the biggest national security failure in American history, not even the National Security Advisor. First David Kay, then Paul O'Neill, then that Hans Blix unscompoop. Now 60 Minutes is airing Dick Clark's security scoop. Condoleezza, make it right, dear, my ratings are sinking down. You must go out on 60 Minutes before they run me out of town. Well, I told those mean commissioners that I'd come down and testify, but not under oath and not on the record, and with Dick Cheney by my side. Condoleezza, testify, dear, I know I can count on you. The Constitution says you don't have to, but Karl Rove says you do. Thank you very much. My name is Bill Passalaqua, and that's the common spelling of that name. If you ever want to get in touch with me or anything, you can go to my website at www.billpassalaqua.com. I'll come to your local chapter and sing. Well, I'm going to go way back to the 60s here for this song. I'll send it out to the fellow who's got a son in Canada right now. I'll thank Doug Zachary for making me learn this song. I'm just a typical American boy from a typical American town. I believe in God and Senator Dodd and keeping old Castro down. So when it came my time to go, I said better dead than red. But when I got to the old draft board, buddy, this is what I said. Sarge, I'm only 18, I got a ruptured spleen and I always carry a purse. I got eyes like a bat and my feet are flat and my asthma's getting worse. Won't you think of my career and my sweetheart dear and my poor old invalid aunt? Besides, I ain't no fool, I'm a-going to school and I'm a-working in a defense plant. I got a wrapped up back and a dislocated disc. I'm allergic to flowers and bugs. When the bombshell hits, I get epileptic fits and I'm addicted to 1,000 drugs. I got the weakness woes, I can't touch my toes, I can barely reach my knees. The enemy come close to me, you know, probably start to sneeze. Sarge, I'm only 18, I got a ruptured spleen and I always carry a purse. I got eyes like a bat, my feet are flat and my asthma's getting worse. Won't you think of my career and my sweetheart dear and my poor old invalid aunt? Besides, I ain't no fool, I'm a-going to school and I'm a-working in a defense plant. For those of you who don't know this song, it's an old Phil Oakes song. I believe it's from about 1968. He was the new Bob Dylan. I've recently rewritten this last verse just to sort of keep up with the times. I hate Milosevic, that son of a... Oh wait, that's I got a new one since then, see. I hate Bin Laden, he's not forgotten. Wait, no, that's not right either. He has kind of been forgotten, hasn't he? Well, I hate Saddam Hussein, the man's insane. This you've gotta see. Someone's gotta go over there, but that someone isn't me. So I wish you well, Sarge, give him hell. Kill me 1,000 or so. And if you ever have a war without blood and gore, I'll be the first to go. Sarge, I'm only 18, I got a ruptured spleen, and I always carry a purse. I got eyes like a bat, my feet are flat, and my asthma's getting worse. Won't you think of my career, my sweetheart dear, and my poor old invalid aunt? Besides, I ain't no fool, going to school, or I'm working in a defense plant.
Anybody else? Turn it up. Really? "10,000 children played in the playground, swinging on swings. Didn't hear the sound of the single plane that flew overhead. The third shift workers were just going to bed. There was a flash of light and a rumbling noise. Gone in an instant, parents, girls, and boys. 10,000 mothers were boiling rice. 3,000 prisoners of war were rolling their dice, hoping they'd survive this terrible storm. When each young man in his uniform vanished in the air in the blink of an eye. One moment they lived, in the next they all died. Hiroshima. Hiroshima. Chickens were sitting on eggs, beaks in their wings, resting their legs. 10,000 farmers were looking at their fields, planning the harvest, guessing at yields, dreaming of life after the war. The next second they weren't living no more. Hiroshima. Hiroshima. 10,000 lovers made love to each other, each one of them thinking there might not be another, living so long with death everywhere, much more than one person alone can bear. But there wasn't time for a final kiss. Who could have known it'd end like this? Hiroshima. Hiroshima. 200,000 people were living their lives, grandparents, children, fathers and wives. Now they're just shadows on the street in such a quick burst of incredible heat. Now listen to them talk about doing it again. From whence came the souls of these terrible men? Hiroshima, 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 Hiroshima.
Example I like to give the most is about a few months ago, one of the researchers on the show came up to me. We monitor Rush, and he came up to me where Rush said something which reflects what the right likes to, the part of the mythology that the right likes to use when talking about the middle class, about the minimum wage. He said, "My friends, 75% of all Americans on the minimum wage are teenagers in their first job." So I told the researcher, okay, well, that's wrong, look it up. And my researcher went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It turns out that 60.1% of Americans on the minimum wage are 20 and above. So where did Rush get his theory? Because as a teenager, I had 3 or 4 jobs. I imagine maybe 13% of people on the minimum wage are teenagers. Not 75% of all Americans on the minimum wage are teenagers. And clearly, Rush got this statistic directly from his butt. And it went out his butt, through his mouth, over into the microphone, over the airways, into the brains of ditto heads who believe this. They believe this stuff. We get our labor statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Rush gets his from the Bureau of Rush's butt.